What's going on, everybody? And today we're tying up a crappie jig that I'm calling the Black Widow Spider Jig. So to start this off, we're just going to start off with our Sally Hansen's to get our thread stuck on there real good. And this is going to be a really unique jig and using some red thread. So we're going to go ahead and get our thread laid on right now. And just like always, down to that hook shank and work our way back up. And then we're going to get ready here. Once we get our thread laid down, I'm using a little bit different tail material, and I'll show you guys that. We're going to clip off that little bit of excess thread, and I'm using a strung guinea feather, a little bit different from what you normally see as a tail feather, but I really like the pattern on these guinea feathers. It's got the red dots, and I think that's going to give it that nice black widowy spider look, or it could be a cow killer ant or ladybug pattern, depending whatever you want to call it, but I'm calling it the Black Widow. And we're going to get that laid on. It can be a little tricky because the feather is wider, but once you get it laid on there, it'll tighten up, and just tricky to get it laid on there, and you can see it tighten up once you get around it a little bit. And we're going to get our few good wraps in now. And if you tie with this feather, always start with a loose wrap with it being wide, and then tighten down as you get it on there. Just kind of manipulate it a little bit, get it how you want it. And then we're going to use some red crystal flash. We're going to tie that in there to give it a little bit of flash, because this is going to be a dark jig. When it gets wet, it's going to be really dark, so that little bit of red flash will give it a little bit of something to pop a little bit. And I have fished this jig several times, and it's did really well for me. It really surprised you guys, so definitely give this a try. So we're going to get our flash tied in and get ready. We're going to have to manipulate that little piece there. We're going to pull that up a little bit, and then we're going to take that what we just cut off and add that into, so we should end up with 4 strands. So we're going to get that tied in. Always start a little loose so you can manipulate it, then tighten it back down. And we're going to go back down here in a second after we clip that. And then we're going to get ready here to tie in some other material. We're using a soft hackle. It's a little bit tougher to find this kind of hackle feather, but it is a soft hackle feather, and it's kind of barred red. And I'm going to clip it and pull off that little bit of fibers and tie that in, just to help so stuff ain't going everywhere. It is a hairy jig to begin with, but we are going to try to keep it clean tying it in. And we're going to tie that feather in on the back side and just leave that sit there once we get it tied in. And this can be a little tricky here. I'm using a Arizona dubbing, and it's black, and it's got a little bit of red flash in it. It's hard to pick up on the camera. It's a really dark, like wine red mixed in with the black, but it'll look really good on this jig. And that's why we added that flash in there a minute ago, because this is going to be a dark jig in the water. So if you fish muddy or dirty water, this jig is going to be able to stand out a little bit, just because it's already that dark color. And that's what we're going for, that dark Black Widow spider look. And I like to use, I'm going to split my thread. I don't like using dubbing loops, so I got a kind of a little trick to this. If you use 2 sewing needles if I can get them out of this bag, my goodness. So I'll take one and lay it on the back of that thread, and then I'll spin that thread a little bit, because this thread is woven together by nature. So you spin it to unweave it a little bit and get it to kind of open up just a little bit. Then we'll take that other needle and we'll get it in there. It can take a couple tries sometimes, but don't take too long once you get the hang of it. It's not very hard to do. You can do it pretty quick. And so once we get it split, I like to try to get a hold of it a little bit, and I like to get my finger in there just to be safe, and then I'll give myself a little extra thread, and then we'll put that dubbing in. We'll get it right in there, and then we'll kind of pull it, stretch it out a little bit, get it in there nice and how you want it to be. You want it to be in there kind of even as you can. Then we're just going to spin that bobbin. You'll probably spin that bobbin about 100 times, but you wanted that dubbing to get nice and tight in there. And once we get it in there a little bit, it can take a minute, but you can see once you spin that bobbin a good bit, it'll spin and that dubbing will start to thread its way into the thread. You can kind of see it here a little bit now. We'll just keep spinning it, and you'll see that start to turn. You got kind of a DNA strand going, and now once you get it to spin in there, it'll just take a matter of no time. It don't take very long. Then I like to grab my thread and just pull up and down on the thread, and it'll spin it in there. So, I mean, it's about in there good as it'll go now, but just give it a couple more spins just to be safe, and get ready to start wrapping. So, can be a little tricky doing this at first, but once you get the hang of it, you get some really unique looking jigs when you add dubbing and things. And it's just different, and sometimes these fish need to see different. The crazier it is sometimes works, and this jig right here is proven to do really well for me. So now we got our dubbing, our flash, our tail tied in. Now we're going to get ready and tie this feather in. But also, if you use dubbing, you want to brush it out a little bit. You can either use a old toothbrush, or a hat strap, which is what I have, any kind of Velcro. Just get that dubbing nice and fluffy, and give it a nice hairy, buggy look to it. And then we're going to wrap that feather in. And it'd be easier if you did this with hackle pliers. This can be a little tricky too when you're first doing this. Just trial and error, and don't ever give up, and you'll get this stuff down too. It can take a minute. It's a little tricky to get this stuff, but we'll get it figured out. And I'm not going to cut this at all, other than what you've seen me cut, just for like the different angles. But everything, you're going to see it right here is on there. I slip. So if you let go of your feather or your slip at all, just pull it back tight. It's completely fine. It'll happen a lot more than you think it's going to. So now we got that feather wrapped in. We're going to wrap it in with our thread, and just like Chanel, you'll go under it a couple times and then back over, and then I'll go under it again. I like to do it 2 to 3 times, and with a feather you can't do it really too much. You want to get that tight in there best you can, because it's already a little tricky. So then we're going to go ahead and clip off that feather tip, and lay it aside because we'll be able to use that for another jig later on as a tail material. So then you'll pull that feather back and give it wrap down a little bit just to keep that feather held down a little bit. And now we're pretty much done with our jig. We're gonna go ahead and do our whip finish, and then this here jig will be done. And let me know what you guys think about it. It's one that I've started and I've had a lot of success on it. It's pretty much a woolly booger, but it's not really a fly lure. It's I'm using a 1/32 to 1/16 ounce weight on the head. But now we're gonna trim up. I like to trim up that feather a little bit, and you can't hardly tell it on the camera, but trimming it up a little bit like that really helps a lot, because it is a very hairy jig, and I don't like the feather to be out much further than the shank of the hook. Now we'll get that trimmed up, and that's our jig right there. And just pull back all that loose fibers, and I'll take a couple pictures of it, and that way you guys can see a better view of what this jig really looks like.